She married a poor janitor. Her parents disowned her. Years later, they found out who he really was. The chandelier above the Joel mansion sparkled like a crown of stars. Dozens of guests in fine suits and glittering gowns filled the grand hall, their laughter echoing through the golden walls. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays of champagne and caviar. A live band played soft classical music, while photographers captured every smile. At the center of it all stood Theresah Joel, radiant in an ivory gown embroidered with tiny pearls. She smiled for the cameras, but inside her heart beat unevenly, not with joy, but fear. Everyone around her assumed this was the happiest day of her life. Her parents were proud. Their daughter was to be engaged to the son of a wealthy tycoon. Mr. Joel, tall and imposing, had spent months arranging this union to elevate their family's name. "Smile, my dear," Mrs. Joel whispered, adjusting her daughter's necklace. "You're about to marry into one of the richest families in the city. This is your moment." Theresah nodded faintly, her eyes drifting toward the mansion doors. Beyond those doors, somewhere in the night, was the man she truly loved, Joseph, the quiet janitor who swept the halls of her father's company every evening after everyone left. While the guests toasted and music swelled, Theresah's mind wandered to the memory of Joseph's warm smile and his rough, calloused hands. He had once told her, "True gold doesn't always shine on the outside." She had believed him ever since. Suddenly, Mr. Joel tapped his glass and raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced proudly, "tonight we celebrate the engagement of my daughter, Theresah Joel, to the honorable son of Mr. Donatus, a family of legacy and prosperity." The crowd clapped loudly. Theresah's throat tightened, cameras flashed, Mrs. Joel's eyes glimmered with pride and expectation. But as everyone cheered, Theresah lowered her head, her lips trembling. Under her breath, so softly no one could hear, she whispered the name of the man her heart truly belonged to. Joseph. Her fingers brushed against the small silver bracelet he had given her, hidden beneath her gown sleeve. A tear threatened to escape, but she blinked it away, forcing another hollow smile for the cameras. As the orchestra played louder and her parents basked in attention, Theresah turned her gaze to the doorway and froze. A familiar figure stood outside in the shadows, watching her. It was Joseph. The night breeze was cool against Theresah's skin as she slipped out through the mansion's side gate, her heels clicking softly on the marble steps. The laughter from inside faded behind her. Outside, beneath the glow of a street lamp, stood Joseph, his work uniform slightly wrinkled, his hands nervously gripping the handle of his mop bucket. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Theresah broke the silence with a trembling whisper. "You shouldn't be here." "If my father sees you," Joseph smiled gently. "I know. But I had to see you. You looked trapped." Her heart twisted. She stepped closer, her perfume mixing with the faint scent of soap and cleaning supplies. "I can't breathe in there, Joseph. They've planned my life like a business deal." He sighed, eyes full of warmth. "You deserve a love that's real, not something bought or arranged." Theresah reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Inside was a silver wristwatch, plain but elegant. "Take this," she said softly, fastening it around his wrist. "So when you look at the time, remember, the world will see who you truly are one day." Joseph's eyes shimmered. "You already do, and that's enough for me." They stood close, the world around them still and silent. The only sound was the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of the city. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch careful, reverent. "Theresah," he murmured, "I may be poor, but I'll spend my life proving that love can build more than money ever could." She smiled sadly. "And I'll stand by you, even if it means losing everything." Unbeknown to them, someone was watching. The family driver, who had followed her outside after noticing her sudden disappearance. From behind the parked limousine, he quietly raised his phone and snapped a picture of Theresah and Joseph holding hands under the lamplight. The next morning, Mr. Joel sat in his office, sipping coffee when his phone buzzed. The message read, "Sir, you might want to see this. Your daughter and the janitor." He clicked the photo, and his face hardened instantly. The cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. His pride boiled into rage. Hook, end of chapter. With fury burning in his eyes, Mr. Joel stormed out of his office. "Find that janitor," he barked to his assistant. "Today he'll learn what it means to touch a Joel." The front doors of the Joel mansion slammed open with a thunderous bang. Theresah jumped where she sat on her bed, startled by the echo of her father's footsteps storming up the staircase. Moments later, Mr. Joel burst into her room, his face flushed with rage, a phone clutched tightly in his hand. He didn't speak at first. He simply threw the phone onto her bed. On the screen was a photo, her and Joseph, standing under the lamplight, holding hands like two forbidden lovers. "What is this, Theresah?" his voice thundered. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think, Father." "Not what I think," he barked, his voice echoing through the corridor. "My daughter. A Joel sneaking around with a janitor, a man who cleans toilets for a living." Tears welled in her eyes. "He's not just a janitor, he's kind, honest, and poor." Her mother's voice cut through from the doorway. Mistress Joel stepped in gracefully, her silk gown swishing as she folded her arms. "You'll destroy our family's reputation, Theresah. Do you know how many people dream of marrying into our name?" "I don't care about names or money," Theresah cried, standing now, her heart pounding. "Joseph loves me for who I am, not for what I have." Her father's voice dropped cold and sharp. "If you marry that man, you're no longer my daughter." Silence filled the room. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Theresah took a deep breath, wiping her tears. "Then so be it," she said softly but firmly. "I choose love over luxury." Mistress Joel gasped, clutching her chest. "You ungrateful child. After all we've done for you." Mr. Joel's jaw tightened. "Pack your things. You have until sundown to leave this house." He turned and stormed out, leaving behind an air thick with heartbreak. Theresah stood frozen, her mother glaring at her as if she were a stranger. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she folded her clothes into a small suitcase. Her hands trembled, but her heart felt strangely light. She had made her choice. As she walked down the marble steps, the maid avoided her gaze. The guards at the gate looked uneasy. Mr. Joel stood by the door, his expression hard and unreadable. "This is your final chance," he said quietly. "Walk away from that man, and everything you own remains yours." Theresah shook her head, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. "I already have everything I need." She stepped into the night. Outside, standing under the falling rain with a single umbrella, waited Joseph, eyes filled with love and sorrow. As she reached him, she whispered, "I'd rather be poor with you than rich without you." He opened the umbrella over her, and together, they disappeared into the rain. The rain poured relentlessly as Theresah and Joseph walked away from the towering gates of the Joel mansion. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but she didn't look back. Every step felt heavier, as though each drop of rain washed away the last traces of her old life. The luxury, the servants, the diamonds, and the pride. When they reached the bus station, Joseph removed his jacket and placed it gently over her shoulders. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You didn't have to go through this because of me." She smiled weakly. "I didn't lose anything that truly mattered. What I have now is real." They boarded a rickety old bus, its metal roof rattling under the rain. Inside, people stared. The drenched woman in a silk dress beside a man in janitor's overalls. But Theresah didn't care. She leaned against Joseph's shoulder and closed her eyes, letting the hum of the engine drown the ache in her chest. Hours later, they arrived at a small neighborhood, far from the city's glamorous heart. The houses were simple, faded paint, uneven roofs, and children playing barefoot in the muddy streets. Joseph led her to a narrow apartment building and unlocked a door on the top floor. "This is home," he said softly. The room was small, one bed, a single table, and a flickering bulb. The air smelled faintly of detergent and rain, but there was warmth in it, something her mansion had never given her. Theresah set her suitcase down and turned to him. "It's perfect," she whispered. They spent the night talking about their dreams. Joseph spoke of one day owning a cleaning company, where every worker would be treated with dignity. Theresah shared her wish to teach underprivileged children someday. As the storm outside softened, she took his hand. "You know, my father thinks you're just a janitor," she said with a soft laugh. Joseph smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." His tone carried something mysterious, but she didn't question it. She simply leaned closer, resting her head on his chest. Back at the mansion, Mr. Joel sat in his office with a glass of whiskey. He signed a document coldly, handed it to his lawyer. "Remove her name from every inheritance record, effective immediately." Mistress Joel looked uneasy. "Is that really necessary, dear? She's still our daughter." He slammed the table. "Not anymore." Meanwhile, miles away, Theresah and Joseph ate their first humble meal together. Instant noodles shared from a single bowl. As they laughed over the small flame of a candle, Joseph glanced at his phone. A message flashed briefly on the screen. "Sir, the board meeting is ready for tomorrow. Will you attend as usual or in disguise?" He quickly turned off the screen before Theresah could see it, and smiled. "Let's just enjoy tonight." As the candlelight flickered across his face, Theresah giggled, feeding him a spoonful of noodles. But Joseph's eyes drifted toward the window, to the dark city skyline where a tall glass building bore his true identity's name. Morning sunlight spilled through the tiny window of their new apartment, painting soft gold on the peeling walls. Theresah stirred awake, momentarily forgetting where she was, until the low hum of the ceiling fan reminded her, no longer in her parents' mansion. No maids, no marble floors, just the faint smell of detergent, and the sound of street vendors calling outside. Beside her, Joseph was already awake, buttoning his faded work shirt, the same one he wore to mop floors at her father's company. His face looked tired, but his smile was calm, the kind of peace that came from purpose. "You're up early," she said, rubbing her eyes. He turned to her with a grin. "I have to catch the 6:30 bus. It's Janitor Day, the one where the CEO walks around pretending to notice everyone." She laughed softly. "If only the CEO really noticed how hard you work." Joseph's smile dimmed for a moment, a fleeting expression that she didn't quite understand. Then he kissed her forehead. "Someday, Theresah. Someday, everyone will see." Later that day, Theresah began looking for work. She went from store to store, her resume printed neatly, but ignored. Most shop owners turned her away, politely, some less kindly. "You look too fancy to be a cashier," one said with a smirk. "You'll quit the moment your rich parents call you back." By evening, she finally found a small grocery shop that needed help at the counter. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. She called Joseph, her voice bright. "I got a job." That night, they celebrated with boiled rice and a tin of sardines. They laughed over the tiny flame of their gas stove, trading stories about their day. "Did you know," Theresah said playfully, "the janitor's wife now earns 5 cedis an hour?" Joseph chuckled. "Then the janitor's wife is richer than him." They both laughed until tears filled their eyes. Yet beneath the laughter, Joseph's gaze occasionally wandered to his old leather briefcase tucked under the bed. Inside were documents, business cards, and a nameplate that read, "Joseph Mensah, CEO, Mensah Facilities Group." He hadn't touched it in months, choosing instead to live simply, to test the sincerity of those around him. As night fell, they stood on the balcony, overlooking the city lights. Theresah wrapped her arms around his waist, whispering, "Even if the world calls us poor, I feel richer than ever." Joseph smiled and kissed her forehead. Love builds more than money ever could. But deep down, his mind was elsewhere on the secret board meeting he was expected to attend the next morning. His phone buzzed again with a reminder. He quickly silenced it, slipping it into his pocket. When Theresah turned away, Joseph's expression shifted. The man who mopped floors by day stared out at the skyline, his own company's logo shining brightly in the distance, and whispered to himself, "Soon, my love, the truth will come." The days turned into weeks, and the couple slowly built a rhythm together. Their small apartment, though humble, was filled with laughter, shared meals, and quiet moments of gratitude. Yet beneath the surface, something unspoken lingered, a secret Joseph carried carefully, like glass in his hands. Every morning, Theresah kissed him goodbye before he left for work. He'd take the old bus with the other janitors, a mop slung over his shoulder, blending into the crowd. But sometimes, just before dawn, she noticed him dressing differently, a crisp white shirt hidden under his uniform, or polished shoes instead of his worn-out sneakers. At first, she thought little of it, but one night she awoke to find his side of the bed empty. The clock read past midnight. Through the cracked window, she saw him outside, standing near a black car parked by the curb, speaking quietly to a man in a suit. Her heart pounded. When he returned minutes later, she pretended to be asleep. The next morning, she asked casually, "Did you go somewhere last night?" Joseph froze for a split second before smiling. "Just needed some air. Couldn't sleep." She nodded, though doubt had already taken root. Something about his calmness felt rehearsed. That afternoon, while sweeping the grocery store floor during a quiet shift, Theresah's co-worker, an elderly woman named Auntie Vida, said softly, "My dear, I saw your husband today. He was entering one of those tall company buildings downtown. Strange for a janitor, no?" Theresah's broom stopped mid-sweep. "Maybe he was cleaning there," she said quickly. Auntie Vida chuckled. "If that's cleaning, then I must be the president. He came in a fine car and wore a suit sharper than my Sunday dress." Theresah forced a laugh, but her stomach tightened. That night she decided to follow him. When Joseph left after dinner, claiming he was working overtime, she waited a few minutes before quietly grabbing her shawl and slipping outside. The moon was bright, the streets quiet. She trailed him at a distance, heart racing, careful not to be seen. He turned the corner toward the city center and stopped beside a sleek black sedan. The driver opened the door respectfully. Joseph removed his janitor's jacket, revealing a perfectly tailored suit beneath. Theresah gasped softly from behind a tree, eyes wide with disbelief. The man she thought she knew, the humble cleaner she had given up her world for, was stepping into a luxury car with tinted windows. "Who are you, Joseph?" she whispered to herself, trembling. When he returned later that night, she was waiting by the window. He smiled, trying to act normal, but her silence pierced through him. "Theresah," he said softly, "why are you awake?" She met his gaze, her eyes glistening. "I should be the one asking that, Joseph. Where do you really go at night?" He hesitated, then walked over and took her hands. "Some truths, my love," he said quietly, "are better revealed when the time is right." She looked into his eyes, the same eyes she trusted with her entire heart. And though they still looked kind, they now held secrets she couldn't read. As Joseph turned away, Theresah whispered under her breath, "Whatever you're hiding, I'll find out." Just then, a white envelope slid under their door, stamped with gold lettering. She picked it up and froze. It was an invitation addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Mensah. The envelope sat on the small dining table, like a mystery, waiting to explode. Theresah turned it over in her hands, again and again, her fingers trembling slightly. The gold lettering shimmered in the light from their flickering bulb. Invitation to the annual Mensah Facilities Group Gala. Her brows furrowed. That was her father's company. Or so she'd always thought. When Joseph came home that evening, whistling softly and carrying a loaf of bread, the sight of the envelope stopped him cold. For a brief moment his calm smile vanished, replaced by something like shock. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. "It was slipped under the door," she replied, studying his face. "Why is it addressed to both of us, Joseph?" He placed the bread on the table and sat down slowly. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "It's just a company event. I used to work there, remember? Maybe they're inviting all employees this year." But Theresah had lived among powerful people all her life. She could read tone, posture, the tiny flicker of a lie, and Joseph's eyes told her there was more. "Don't lie to me," she whispered. "I saw you, Joseph. I followed you last night. I saw the car, the suit, the driver." Silence. The fan hummed overhead, spinning lazily. Joseph leaned forward, his fingers interlocked on the table, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are reasons, Theresah. Reasons I can't explain yet, but I swear to you, everything I've done, every secret, it's all for something good. Tears welled in her eyes. You've kept me in the dark for months. I gave up my family, my inheritance, for honesty, for love. And now I don't even know who I married. Joseph's face softened. You married the same man who swept those office floors, the one who loves you beyond all things. I just can't tell you everything yet. Theresah turned away, her shoulders shaking. Then maybe you don't trust me as much as you say you do. He stood moving to hold her, but she stepped back. The air between them was thick with tension. Love? Doubt wrestling for space. After a long pause, he spoke again, quietly but firmly. Come with me to the gala. You'll understand everything then. Elsewhere, across the city, Mistress Joel sat in her church pew, gossiping in whispers with her friends. My daughter married a janitor, she said bitterly. Now she's living in some slum. Maybe when she's done scrubbing floors, she'll crawl back home. Her friends murmured pity, but the pastor's wife frowned. Be careful, Mistress Joel. God humbles the proud in his own way. Mistress Joel waved dismissively, her pride blinding her to the storm coming her way. That night, Theresah sat alone on their small balcony, holding the invitation under the moonlight. Despite her pain, curiosity burned in her chest. The words printed on it shimmered again. Annual Mensa Facilities Group Gala. Attendance mandatory for key members and associates. Her thoughts raced. Key members, associates. She folded the envelope slowly and whispered, whatever happens at that gala, I'll finally know who you are, Joseph. Inside their bedroom, unseen by Theresah, Joseph opened a hidden safe behind a loose wall panel. Inside lay a sleek, black CEO identification card, engraved with his full name, Joseph Mensah, Chief Executive Officer. He stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into his jacket pocket and murmured, the truth will finally come. The morning sun bathed their small apartment in soft gold, but Theresah barely noticed it. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection. The woman who had once worn diamonds and designer gowns now wore a second-hand dress with a faded hem. Yet as she straightened her shoulders, there was quiet dignity in her eyes. Behind her, Joseph adjusted his cufflinks, his expression calm but distant. The gala invitation lay on the table between them, untouched since the night before. So, Theresah said at last, breaking the silence, you really want us to go? Yes, Joseph replied simply, meeting her gaze through the mirror. It's time for truth. Her heart skipped. Truth. He turned away, brushing invisible dust off his sleeve. You'll understand when we get there. That afternoon, the city buzzed with excitement. Billboards and radio ads spoke of the Grand Mensa Facilities Group annual gala, one of the most prestigious business events of the year. CEOs, investors, and dignitaries would all be there, including Mr. and Mrs. Joel, who had been invited as honorary guests. At the Joel mansion, Mrs. Joel fussed over her gown in front of the mirror. It's been too long since anyone important saw us, she said smugly. Maybe tonight people will forget about that silly scandal with Theresah. Mr. Joel adjusted his bow tie. Let's just hope she stays far away. That chapter is closed. He didn't know how wrong he was. Evening arrived. The ballroom glimmered beneath 1,000 crystal lights. Waiters carried silver trays, a string quartet played softly, and guests whispered over glasses of champagne. As Theresah and Joseph stepped through the grand entrance, a hush rippled across the hall. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. Mrs. Joel froze mid-sip, nearly choking on her wine. No, it can't be. Mr. Joel's jaw tightened. She actually showed her face here. Theresah felt every pair of eyes on her. Her heart pounded, but Joseph's hand was steady in hers. He leaned closer and whispered, "Don't be afraid. Stand tall." They walked further in, their steps echoing across the marble floor. People murmured in confusion. The same janitor they'd seen mopping hallways, now wearing a tailored black tuxedo, walking beside the woman he supposedly ruined. Moments later, the event host stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you for joining us tonight as we honor hard work, humility, and leadership. But before we begin, it's time to welcome our very own, the visionary behind our success. the man whose leadership transformed this company into an empire. Theresah turned to Joseph, her lips parting in confusion. The host's voice rang out across the ballroom. "Please welcome Mr. Joseph Mensah, Chief Executive Officer of Mensah Facilities Group." The crowd erupted into stunned applause. Cameras flashed, whispers turned into gasps. Theresah's knees nearly gave way as she turned to him, her husband, who now stepped forward, confidence radiating from every movement. He took the stage as if he'd belonged there all along. Behind him, a large screen lit up with his portrait. Joseph in a corporate suit, his name beneath the title, CEO and founder. Mrs. Joel's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Mr. Joel's face went pale. Joseph smiled faintly at the audience and began his speech. "Years ago," he said, his deep voice echoing through the hall, "I started in this very company, not as a manager, not as a leader, but as a janitor. I wanted to understand the heart of hard work, to see who people truly were when they thought no one important was watching." The audience hung on every word. Theresah's eyes filled with tears. He paused and looked directly at her. "And in that journey, I found something far more valuable than wealth. I found love that saw beyond appearance." As the crowd erupted into applause, Joseph stepped down from the stage and reached for Theresah's trembling hand. In that moment, she realized the truth she had been chasing all along. Her husband had never been hiding poverty. He had been hiding greatness. The ballroom shimmered like a sea of diamonds. Chandeliers spilled golden light across marble floors. A live orchestra played softly in the corner. Laughter and chatter echoed among elegantly dressed guests. The city's richest and most powerful. Theresah stood near the entrance beside Joseph, her fingers trembling slightly as she held his arm. Every step deeper into that glittering room felt like stepping into a world she no longer belonged to. And yet tonight, that world was about to change forever. Across the hall, Mr. and Mistress Joel mingled with investors, smiling proudly, unaware of what fate had prepared for them. Mistress Joel, in a sequined gold gown, whispered to a friend, "Imagine my daughter showing up here with that janitor. I'd die of shame." Before the friend could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. The host stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the man whose leadership, humility, and innovation have taken Mensah Facilities Group to unimaginable heights. Please welcome our CEO and founder, Mr. Joseph Mensah." Every head turned. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then came the sound of applause, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Theresah's eyes widened. She turned to Joseph, her lips parting in disbelief. Joseph gave her a soft smile. "Now you know." He released her hand gently and walked toward the stage, his steps confident, his black tuxedo gleaming under the golden lights. The same man who once carried a mop now stood tall before the city's elite, every trace of humility now wrapped in quiet power. On the giant screen behind him, photos flashed, images of Joseph working, leading meetings, signing contracts. His name appeared in bold gold letters. Joseph Mensah, Chief Executive Officer, Mensah Facilities Group. Mistress Joel gasped so loudly the crowd turned to look. Mr. Joel's face turned ashen. "Impossible," he muttered. "That's..." But there he was, standing behind the podium, composed and radiant. Joseph began to speak, his voice calm and steady. "When I first joined this company, I chose to begin at the lowest level, not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand people. I wanted to see who they were when they thought no one important was watching." He paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze met Theresah's. Her eyes glistened with tears. "In that journey," he continued, "I found one person who saw me for who I truly was, not for what I appeared to be. Her love became my greatest fortune." Whispers swept through the hall like wind cameras turned toward Theresah, her face glowing with emotion and disbelief. At the back of the hall, Mistress Joel grabbed her husband's arm. "We made a mistake, Joel," she whispered in horror. "A terrible mistake." He didn't respond. His pride had frozen him solid. When the applause thundered once more, Joseph stepped down from the stage. He walked directly to Theresah, and took her hand in front of everyone. The gasps filled the air as he leaned close and said softly, "You gave me love when I had nothing. Now I give you everything." As flashbulbs exploded around them, Joseph turned toward her stunned parents and said with quiet grace, "Mr. and Mistress Joel, allow me to reintroduce myself. The janitor you once dismissed is the man your daughter proudly calls husband." A stunned silence fell over the grand hall. All that could be heard was the faint hum of the air conditioning, the soft crackle of camera flashes. The entire crowd stood frozen, eyes darting between Joseph, the newly revealed CEO, and Theresah, the woman who had once been pitied for marrying a janitor. Mr. Joel blinked several times, as if hoping the scene before him would vanish. This must be some sort of trick," he muttered under his breath. His hands trembled slightly, his once proud posture collapsing under the weight of disbelief. But there was no trick. The man he had insulted, humiliated, and dismissed stood tall before him, calm, poised, and surrounded by applause. Joseph held Theresah's hand as he faced the crowd once more. "There was a time," he said, his voice steady and rich, "when people saw me and thought I was worth nothing. They laughed, they mocked, but humility," he paused, letting the silence draw everyone closer, "is the true test of character." His eyes moved to Mr. and Mistress Joel. "Some people value wealth so much, they forget the greatest riches come from the heart." Mistress Joel lowered her gaze, her face pale. She clutched her purse tightly, as if hoping it could hide her shame. Theresah's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of awe. The man she had loved despite everything now stood revealed, as a king she never knew she had married. After his speech, the hall erupted into applause. Guests surrounded Joseph, shaking his hand, praising his brilliance. "Incredible story," one investor exclaimed. "You tested loyalty through humility. Genius." Theresah stood slightly apart, overwhelmed by emotion. Everything made sense now. The late nights, the hidden phone calls, the mysterious suits. He had been living a double life, not out of deceit, but out of purpose. When he finally returned to her side, she whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" He smiled gently, "Because I wanted to know if you'd still choose me, even when the world called me poor." She threw her arms around him, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I would choose you in any life." Across the room, the Joels stood isolated, no longer the center of admiration. Mr. Joel's pride was cracking visibly. His mouth opened, then closed again, words refusing to form. Mistress Joel wiped her eyes, whispering, As the night drew on, the host announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of tonight's revelation, the CEO would like to dedicate this evening's final dance to his beloved wife." Music swelled. Joseph extended his hand to Theresah, and she placed hers in his. The crowd parted as they stepped onto the dance floor. Under the soft glow of chandeliers, they moved gracefully. A janitor and his bride, now seen for who they truly were. Each step told a story of sacrifice, faith, and love that had weathered shame and poverty to find its crown. As the orchestra played the final note, Joseph leaned close and whispered, "The ones who cast us away will come knocking. But this time, the door will not open so easily." The morning after the gala felt like waking from a dream. Headlines filled every newspaper and television screen. Janitor turns out to be billionaire CEO. Love triumphs over pride. Theresah Joel chose love, not wealth, and love made her queen. Photos from the event showed Joseph and Theresah dancing beneath chandeliers, their smiles genuine, their story now the talk of the nation. But at the Joel mansion, silence replaced celebration. Mr. Joel sat at the breakfast table, staring blankly at the newspaper. His cup of coffee went untouched, growing cold. Across from him, Mrs. Joel dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "I don't understand, Joel," she whispered. "How could we not have known? The man we insulted, the man we threw our daughter away for." He slammed the paper down, the sound echoing through the vast dining room. "Enough. What's done is done." But even he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. Pride battled regret inside him, but regret was winning. That afternoon, unable to bear it anymore, Mrs. Joel broke. She rose from her chair and said firmly, "I'm going to see our daughter." Her husband glared at her. "You will not go begging to them like some peasant." She turned to him, eyes blazing with rare defiance. "Then stay here and drown in your pride." "I lost my daughter once. I will not lose her again." And with that, she left. When she arrived at the Mensa Group headquarters, she was greeted by marble floors, glass elevators, and a receptionist who smiled politely. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" Mrs. Joel swallowed. I'm her mother." Moments later, the elevator doors opened, and there stood Theresah, radiant and graceful in a cream-colored business dress. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mrs. Joel whispered, "My child." Theresah's eyes softened. "Mother." The older woman rushed forward, holding her daughter tightly, sobbing into her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Theresah. We were blind. Your father and we thought money made us better, but it only made us cruel." Tears welled in Theresah's eyes. "You hurt us deeply, Mama. You made me choose between love and family." "I know," Mrs. Joel cried, "and I would undo it all if I could." Just then, Joseph entered the room, his expression calm but guarded. Mrs. Joel straightened quickly, her voice trembling. "Joseph, please, forgive us. We were wrong about you." About everything, he studied her quietly before speaking. "I hold no grudges, Ma'am. But forgiveness isn't about words, it's about change." She nodded, her lips quivering. "Please, let us make it right. Your father wants to see you too." Theresah looked at Joseph, then back at her mother. "We'll come," she said gently, "but not to prove anything, only to bring peace." That evening, the couple arrived at the Joel mansion. Mr. Joel was waiting, his face pale, his pride barely holding together. As Joseph entered, he stood stiffly. "Mr. Mensah," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. I judged you wrongly." Joseph didn't gloat. He simply nodded. "We all learn our lessons in time." For the first time in years, they all sat at the same table, no servants, no champagne, just tea and quiet conversation. The air was heavy but healing. As they rose to leave, Mr. Joel cleared his throat. "Joseph, if there's ever a way I can repay you." Joseph smiled faintly. "Live humbly, sir." That's repayment enough. But as they walked out of the mansion, Joseph's expression darkened slightly. "The world may forgive," he murmured to Theresah, "but pride never forgets its fall." The night after their visit to the Joel mansion, Theresah couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of their luxurious new home, a far cry from their old one-room apartment. Staring at the city lights twinkling like distant memories, the events of the past few days replayed in her mind like scenes from a movie. The gala, the shock, her parents' tears, Joseph's quiet forgiveness. But one question still burned inside her. Why? Why would a man as powerful as Joseph ever pretend to be a janitor? She turned when she heard soft footsteps behind her. Joseph appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark trousers. His expression was gentle, but there was something deeper in his eyes, the look of a man ready to unburden his soul. "You're still awake," he said softly. Theresah nodded. "I keep thinking about everything, about you. About how you lived like a poor man. You could have lived like a king. Why, Joseph? Why did you hide who you really were?" He walked closer and sat beside her. The city's glow reflected in his eyes. "I grew up with everything," he began quietly. "My late uncle, the founder of Mensa Facilities Group, raised me. After my parents died, he was a brilliant man but lonely, and he warned me about one thing: wealth attracts faces, not hearts. When he passed away, I inherited everything, but I didn't want to live surrounded by people who only smiled because of my money." Theresah listened, her heart tightening. So Joseph continued, "I decided to start from the bottom, to see the truth of people. I worked as a janitor, not just in my company, but in my life. I wanted to find someone who could see me, not my title." His eyes softened as he looked at her. "And then I met you." A tear rolled down her cheek. "You could have told me." He shook his head gently. "If I had, Would you have believed that your love was real? Or would you have thought it was fate trying to test you? I needed to know, Theresah. I needed to be certain that I wasn't just another rich man buying affection. She smiled through her tears. And now you know. Yes, he whispered, taking her hands. You loved me. When the world called me a nobody, you stood beside me when your own family turned away. You gave me hope when I had only shadows. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. You taught me what real wealth means. The room fell silent, except for the sound of the wind brushing against the window. Outside, the city glimmered, the same city where they had once walked in the rain, penniless, but proud. Joseph smiled faintly. You know, he said, half joking. The funny thing is, I still miss mopping the floors sometimes. There's peace in simplicity. Theresah laughed softly, wiping her tears. If you ever want to do it again. But this time, I'll bring the bucket. They both laughed, their voices mingling with the night air, light and free. As the laughter faded, Joseph's phone buzzed with a message. He frowned slightly. It was from his board secretary. Sir, Mr. Joel has requested an urgent business meeting. He says it's about an investment. Joseph looked up at Theresah, his smile fading. It seems your father hasn't learned everything yet. The next morning dawned clear and bright, but inside Joseph's office, the air was thick with tension. His assistant, Mr. Ajay, entered quietly, placing a file on the polished mahogany desk. Sir, he said, adjusting his glasses, Mr. Joel has been waiting in the lobby for 20 minutes. Should I send him in? Joseph looked up from his laptop. His expression was unreadable, calm, composed, but his eyes were sharp. Yes, he said simply. Moments later, Mr. Joel stepped into the office, wearing an expensive suit that did little to hide his nervousness. He glanced around at the grandeur of the CEO's suite, the panoramic city view, the gold-framed awards, the silent authority in every detail. For the first time in his life, the proud businessman felt small. Joseph, he began stiffly, forcing a smile. It's good to see you again, I must say. You've built something quite impressive here. Joseph leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. Impressive, yes, but not as impressive as how quickly people change their tone when fortunes shift. Mr. Joel's fake smile faltered. I didn't come here for hostility, he said. I came with an opportunity. I've been developing a real estate proposal, something I think Mensa Facilities Group would be interested in investing in. Joseph regarded him silently for a moment. Then he spoke slowly. You want me to invest in your company, the same company that mocked and rejected me when I was your janitor. The words hit like thunder. Mr. Joel's face flushed. That was a misunderstanding. I didn't know who you truly were. Exactly, Joseph said, his voice calm but cutting. You didn't know because you never cared to look beyond appearances. Just then, the office door opened. Theresah stepped in gracefully, carrying a folder. Her eyes widened when she saw her father. He stood quickly, trying to smile. My daughter, you look radiant. Theresah's tone was calm but distant. What are you doing here? He cleared his throat, trying to fix what pride broke. She looked at Joseph, who gave her a subtle nod, silently assuring her to stay strong. Joseph rose from his chair and circled his desk slowly. Mr. Joel, he said, you once told me I wasn't good enough for your daughter, that I'd never amount to anything. He paused, his gaze steady. Now you're standing in my office asking for my help. Mr. Joel lowered his eyes. The silence stretched. Finally, Joseph sighed softly and said, I'll consider your proposal. Not because I owe you, but because I believe in second chances. But understand this. Here, we value integrity. Mr. Joel nodded humbly. Understood. Later that evening, Joseph and Theresah sat together in the quiet of their home. She leaned against him, her voice tender. You didn't have to help him, you know. Joseph smiled faintly. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from bitterness. Besides, sometimes showing grace teaches more than revenge ever could. Theresah looked up at him, her eyes full of admiration. You've changed, He chuckled softly. No, the world just sees me differently now. Meanwhile, back at the Joel mansion, Mr. Joel sat at his desk, staring at the partnership papers Joseph had signed. His wife entered quietly. Well? She asked. He exhaled shakily. He agreed. But not because he needed me. Because he's the better man. Mistress Joel smiled sadly. Maybe that's the lesson. We both need it. As Mr. Joel folded the contract carefully, he murmured, The janitor we rejected now signs the checks that feed our future. And far away, Joseph whispered to Theresah, Let the past rest, the future is ours to build. Weeks passed, and life in the city moved on. But for Mr. and Mistress Joel, the glow of wealth had faded into something quieter. Their once thriving business had begun to crumble. The clients pulled out of contracts, investors withdrew, and the proud family name that once commanded respect now carried a shadow of mockery. At night, Mr. Joel sat alone in his study, staring at unpaid bills and half-empty ledgers. The silence of his mansion, once filled with servants and laughter, now echoed like guilt. Every tick of the wall clock reminded him of the arrogance that had cost him everything. One morning, Mistress Joel entered the room holding a letter. It's from the charity board, she said softly. They declined our donation proposal again. They said they prefer to work with the Mensa Foundation now. Mr. Joel closed his eyes. Of course they do, he whispered bitterly. Across the city, Theresah and Joseph had turned their success into purpose. Together, they founded the Mensa Hope Initiative, an organization helping underprivileged children access education, job training. The once poor couple had become a symbol of humility and grace. One bright Saturday morning, their foundation hosted a community breakfast for orphaned children. Long tables stretched across the courtyard, filled with laughter, fresh bread, and steaming porridge. Theresah, dressed in a simple floral dress, moved from table to table, serving food and chatting with the kids. Her laughter filled the air, light and pure. When Joseph joined her, she smiled warmly. Look around, love. This is what wealth should do. Feed souls, not egos. He nodded, his eyes full of pride. And this, he said softly, is the woman I fell in love with. As the morning went on, a car pulled up quietly at the gate. A familiar one, black, polished, but with an air of weariness. The guard walked up to Joseph and whispered, Sir, there are visitors asking to see you. Joseph's smile faded slightly, but he nodded. Let them in. Moments later, Mr. and Mistress Joel stepped into the courtyard. They looked smaller, somehow. Not physically, but in spirit. The proud posture that once towered over others was gone. Theresah froze mid-conversation when she saw them. Her ladle clattered softly against the bowl. Mother? Mistress Joel's eyes brimmed with tears. Yes, my daughter. We came not for business, not for money, but for forgiveness. The children fell silent, watching curiously as the once mighty couple approached humbly. Mr. Joel cleared his throat, voice trembling. Theresah, I have spent every night wishing I could take back what I said. I was blinded by pride. You chose love. And I chose appearances. The tears filled Theresah's eyes. He continued, voice cracking. When I saw what you've built, how you care for others, I realized I didn't raise a failure. I raised a better version of myself. Mistress Joel took Theresah's hands, sobbing softly. Please, let us be a family again. For a long moment, Theresah said nothing. She looked at Joseph, who simply gave a small nod, a gesture of grace, of letting go. Theresah turned back to her parents, her voice soft but steady. You both hurt me more than I can ever explain, but I also learned that forgiveness frees the heart, and I won't let bitterness chain mine. She embraced her mother first, then her father. Tears flowed freely, cleansing. The children nearby began to clap, shyly, sensing that something beautiful had just happened. As they all sat down together for the first time in years, Joseph raised his cup and said quietly, To the fall of pride and the rise of love. And Mr. Joel, humbled and teary-eyed, replied, To the janitor who became my teacher. The sun shone gently over the courtyard of the Mensa Hope Initiative, casting golden light on the faces of children. Laughing and playing, the air smelled of freshly baked bread and blossoming flowers, a symbol of new beginnings. At one of the tables sat Theresah, Joseph and her parents Mr. and Mistress Joel, sharing their first peaceful breakfast together in years. It was quiet at first, the kind of silence that carried more emotion than words. Then Mistress Joel finally broke it. "Theresah, my daughter," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I've been replaying the day you left our home in my mind. I see your face, your tears, the suitcase in your hand, and I hear my own voice, harsh and cold. I wish I could erase it." Theresah reached out, touching her mother's hand. "You can't erase the past, Mama," she said gently, "but you can build something better now." Her father cleared his throat. "And I intend to," he said quietly. His tone lacked its usual arrogance. It was the voice of a man finally humbled by life. "Joseph, I wronged you deeply. I saw you as less than a man because of your work, because of my own foolish pride. But I've realized something. Wealth can fill your house, but not your heart." Joseph smiled faintly, nodding. "We all learn our lessons in different ways, Mr. Joel. What matters is that we learn them before it's too late." There was a long pause, and then Mr. Joel stood holding out his hand. "If you'll have it, son, I'd like to start over as family." Joseph rose slowly and took the older man's hand. "You already are family," he said warmly. "This time, not by blood or class, but by forgiveness." Later that afternoon, the courtyard filled with music and laughter as volunteers and children sang songs of joy. Mistress Joel joined Theresah in serving food, her designer heels long replaced by comfortable slippers. Mr. Joel helped one of the older boys fix a broken bicycle, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Watching them, Theresah leaned against Joseph's shoulder. "It feels strange," she said softly, "seeing them like this, so human." Joseph chuckled quietly. "Pride can make people forget who they are. But when life humbles you, it brings you back home." Theresah nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "And to think, all of this began because I refused to give up on love." Joseph wrapped his arm around her. "You didn't just hold on to love, Theresah, you gave it meaning." That evening, as the sun began to set, Mr. Joel approached the couple once more. "Joseph," he said, "I don't expect you to trust me easily again, but if you'd allow it, I'd like to support your foundation. Maybe I can finally use what's left of my wealth for something good." Joseph smiled. "That's a good start, sir. Let's use the mistakes of yesterday to bless tomorrow." They all laughed softly, the tension that had haunted them for years now replaced by calm. As night fell, the four of them stood together under the stars, no longer divided by pride or wealth. Theresah took Joseph's hand and whispered, "Love didn't just change us, it healed us." And for the first time in a long time, her father whispered back, "And I'm finally proud. Not of what you have, but of who you've become." Morning sunlight poured softly through the tall glass windows of the Mensa Foundation headquarters, illuminating walls filled with photographs of smiling children and families whose lives had been changed. Each picture told a story, a life rebuilt, a dream restored, a heart healed. At the center of this world stood Theresah and Joseph, side by side, dressed simply, but radiating quiet grace. Today marked the grand opening of a new wing of their foundation, the Joel Family Educational Center, named in honor of reconciliation and forgiveness. Guests filled the courtyard. Reporters, volunteers, and children gathered as Joseph stepped forward to speak. "Years ago," he began, his deep voice echoing across the hall, "I learned that wealth means nothing. It does not serve others. Love, humility, and forgiveness. These are the real treasures that never fade." He turned to Theresah, smiling. "And I learned that from my wife, the woman who chose love over luxury." Soft applause rippled through the crowd. Theresah stepped up to the microphone next, her eyes glistening with emotion. "When I left my parents' home, I thought I was walking away from everything. But what I found was something far greater. A love that taught me the meaning of true wealth. Today, this center stands as a reminder that even when families break, forgiveness can rebuild them, stronger than before." The audience rose in a standing ovation. At the front row, Mr. and Mistress Joel clapped through their tears. Their once proud faces now glowed with peace. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and children played around the new playground, Mr. Joel approached Joseph quietly. "You could have left us behind," he said softly. "But instead, you gave us a second chance. I'll spend the rest of my life honoring that." Joseph smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already have, sir. The moment you humbled yourself, you became richer than any bank could make you." Nearby, Mistress Joel was helping serve juice to the children, laughing softly, the sound of a woman whose pride had melted into kindness. Later that evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, Theresah and Joseph stood together on the balcony, overlooking the city that had once looked down on them. The wind carried distant laughter and music from the courtyard. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Theresah asked quietly, leaning into him. Joseph smiled. "Every day from that night in the rain to this moment, it feels like a lifetime of grace." She looked at him tenderly. "And you know what?" "What?" "That the man who mopped floors now builds futures." He chuckled softly, wrapping his arm around her waist. "And the woman who gave up everything now gives hope to thousands." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city lights flicker to life, reminders that even in darkness, there's always a spark of redemption waiting to shine. Before going inside, Theresah turned once more toward the horizon and whispered, "Love didn't just change our story, Joseph. It wrote a new one." He kissed her forehead and replied, "And it's only the beginning." As the night settled gently over the city, the couple walked hand in hand, their hearts free from the chains of pride and pain. The world had once judged them by wealth, but now it celebrated them for something far greater: the power of love, humility, and forgiveness. And so, beneath the golden glow of a new dawn, they built not just an empire, but a legacy. Now here are 10 moral lessons from this story. 1. Never judge people by their appearance or status. True worth cannot be measured by money, job titles, or appearances. The man the world called a poor janitor turned out to be the owner of the company. Life constantly reminds us that greatness often hides behind humble beginnings. 2. Love is measured by character, not wealth. Theresah chose love over luxury and discovered the purest form of happiness. Real love sees the heart, not the wallet. When love is built on sincerity and respect, it can survive even the harshest storms. 3. Pride can destroy what love builds. Mr. and Mistress Joel's arrogance blinded them to what truly mattered: their daughter's happiness. Their obsession with status cost them their peace and almost their family. Pride isolates, but humility restores. 4. Forgiveness is the strongest form of strength. Joseph forgave the very people who humiliated him. His grace transformed bitterness into healing, proving that forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. 5. Wealth without compassion is emptiness. The Joels learned that money can buy luxury, but never respect, peace, or love. Joseph and Theresah used their blessings to uplift others, showing that true success is measured by how many lives you touch. 6. Life has a way of humbling the proud. Those who look down on others often find themselves looking up later. When the truth came out, the Joels realized that life's tables can turn, and that humility is more valuable than gold. 7. True power lies in kindness and grace. Joseph's greatest victory wasn't revealing his wealth. It was choosing mercy over revenge. He showed that real power isn't about conquering people but forgiving them. 8. Family bonds can heal through humility. Despite all the pain, Theresah opened her heart to forgive her parents. Her compassion rebuilt her family and turned shame into legacy. Love, when mixed with humility, can mend even the deepest wounds. 9. Sometimes God hides blessings behind disappointment. Theresah thought she lost everything when her parents disowned her. But God was preparing her for something far greater, a life filled with love, purpose, and grace. Every rejection can be divine redirection. 10 True wealth is what you give back. By using their success to help orphans and the poor, Theresah and Joseph proved that the richest people are those who make others richer in hope and kindness. Love that endures hardship is worth more than gold, and humility opens doors that pride will forever keep closed.